So, we are back after a little bit of a delay, after some technical difficulties, after some life stuff that just kind of came at me like a speeding train, and I don't know why I'm wearing these glasses. I thought it would just be irreverent or irrelevant. We're finally back. We're going to start getting into lectures. We're going to go over Chapter 1 today, or as much of Chapter 1 as I can muster out, given the fact that there are several other things that I want to do, including showing a video piece by one of your peers in our class, Jonathan Cleveland, who was gracious enough to send me a little piece, a little ditty that he did, a little piece of video, a funny video that he calls The Invisible Man. I would like to rename it The Headless Horseman, but I'm going to respect Mr. Cleveland's intellectual property and not rename it. But we're going to watch that. In fact, we're going to watch that right now. So with no further ado, here is John's little film called The Invisible Man.
Hey, Dad, are you enjoying your lunch today?
Oh, it's really good. I like sitting up here in the breeze and rain. In sunshine. Boy, this lunch is good. Your grandmother couldn't have made a better meal for me today. Alexa, get out of here. Boy, I'm gonna have me some more bread pudding. This bread pudding is the best bread pudding I've ever eaten.
Love you, Daddy. Love you, Dad.
Oh, you scared me. Oh, that was a good one. I love you.
That's fine.
It sure is nice to walk through the woods with you guys. We've been walking a long time. Hello, everyone. I am Tate the horse. Yeah.
Daddy, can you teach me how to ride a horse?
Of course I will. Now, you hold tight to those reins, and Lynette, you lead the horse off for her. Being invisible doesn't stop anyone from doing anything. See, you can do it. Invisible Man will teach you. After I lost my powers of invisibility, first thing I wanted to do was get on a horse and ride and show the girls how it's done. This is me, the Uninvisible Man.
Okay, so there you go, and and I'm showing it because it's for a few different reasons. One of the reasons that I'm showing it is that I would submit. I want to keep an open door policy to people in the class who want to do show and tell, want to do show work or talk about things they're doing with the media. In the media, irregardless of what it is. It could be, your music, Having said that, I want to segue into a couple of different things, If you've got anything that you want to show your peers, get an audience. It's like, getting an audience right now for anything under pandemic conditions is kind of a trick. So, this is a place where I'm more than willing to show stuff, talk about stuff, put stuff up. for you on the blog that's is coalescing. out of this mist-like nebula as we speak. The blog is actually like doing itself, you know, and I'm just a tool for it. I'm a slave to the blog. The blog tells me what to do, you know. So, you know, having said that, I can like just run a disclaimer concerning the fact that whatever comes out of my mouth has nothing to do with me. The blog controls everything, not like the Matrix in the other class. So, an open invitation for people to want to put up videos or want to send me videos, and we can like put them on the lectures and just kind of spice things up a little bit. I have a tendency. Last semester, I had a tendency to try to put some bells and whistles on this game. You know, I would do characters and all of that, and it's very, very time consuming. So I'm always like willing to let somebody else like basically run the show, you know. So there's that invitation. Having said that, I want to talk a little bit about the syllabus and my alarm clock going off, which for some reason it's decided to. I'm not going to edit this out. I just don't care. Want to talk a little bit about the syllabus. The syllabus will be out sometime this week for you to look at. But as far as where we should be this coming week, going to do chapter 1 of the Hansen monster. It's called Living in a Media World. And as far as your assignment for this week, very simple. Just, actually it's a little bit complicated. It's like, you know, it's going to be hard to wrap your heads around this, but, we're going to read chapter 2. I know it's a stretch. I know, like, it's just, you know, it's like one of these hard assignments, but you're going to read chapter 2, and then I'm going to lecture on chapter 2, you know, amidst, you know, myriad other things. A lot of life stuff just got in the way this week, getting up on the lectures. They're going to be a lot more timely in the future. Bongiorno had many infrastructural things going on, including this morning where he had to go and buy this bed. I had to go buy a new bed and move it in here. And the thing is, it's like, it's a really great bed, but the guy told me, like, it needs 24 hours. Like, I can't sleep on it tonight. I gotta sleep in the front bed, the front room. But I can't sleep on it tonight. He said, you gotta give it like 24 hours to like it's dough. You know, like, you need it to rise, you know, it's one of these, like... So, you know, having said that, Bongiorno should be sleeping a lot better and be a lot more peppier and not need to go to the chiropractor. Just all this stuff has just been getting in the way, you know, at the beginning of the semester, but I assure you that you're my top priority, bar none. Bar any of the other irons I got going on in the fire. It's like the classes... you know, rule. So syllabus, that will be out. That will be on Blackboard soon. It's just getting things out early on in the game. It's just, you know, the usual kind of problems due to the fact that this is a new textbook that we're using. And I am, I'm kind of mixed about it. I think he's okay. But I was, you know, for the last 2 years, we were using this other book by Stanley Barron, and I was so, like, you know, engaged in that. Had all the PowerPoints done. All I would have to do is just, like, roll out of bed and, like, put the PowerPoints on. But then I had to, like, redo all the PowerPoints and all that. And Hansen has a different orientation, you know, towards certain things, you know, that I had to kind of, like, rethink. So there's that. There's learning how to deal. There's learning how to deal with the pandemic, and then there's learning how to deal with this book. And there's no. That's a false equivalency. That's a false equivalency. I want to talk a little bit about what will be coming up here and what the grades are going to be based on. one thing, and I've already talked about it, is that there's probably going to be 3 quizzes. All right, 3 quizzes. Don't get all crazy, because we're probably going to do one in early October, November, before Thanksgiving break. Unless the world has collapsed already at that point. I'm not sure. It's like day by day. It's day by day. It's one day at a time. And probably one in early December. And those quizzes usually just consist of material from whatever chapters or reading material that we've dealt with up to that point. And you usually have access to all of the questions ahead of time, because I usually cull them from the book and the other online resources. You guys are going to be getting links to some of the online resources that Hansen talks about in the book too. There's a website with extra material, the kind of stuff that publishers just love to do to get people to not only buy the book, but kind of lock them in, just keep on buying the book. We'll talk about the ways in which media sells itself, attempts to sell itself. Media scans. What's a media scan? This is something that I picked up. I used to take an animation class actually down at the New School in New York with a guy who had basically written the book on animation. He would do media scans, and I thought it was a really good idea. So, it's like I kind of adopted it, for this class. What's a media scan, and what's it going to consist of for you? Basically, everybody is going to on any given week, 2 people will be scheduled to do a media scan. Under normal, pre-apocalyptic, pre-pandemic conditions, you would do them in class. And it was just a brief show and tell of things like some special app you were using, or something in media that you were engaged in, and or even like things like showing a film that you're working on, or showing some blog you're working on, or telling us about a game that you're really into. But those media scans and that schedule will be up soon, because we need to, with the amount of people we have in the class, we usually got to schedule out, so there'll be, and it's all going to have to be on Blackboard. You'll have the day where you upload your media scan, whatever form it's going to be, and we'll talk more about that. Whatever questions you're going to have, and those are they're not major projects. I want to stress the idea that those are like just little mini projects that are not going to weigh too greatly on your grade. Maybe 10%. You do want to do them, because my experience. It usually turns into a circus, all right? It usually turns into a circus of people not being ready or being absent the day that they're assigned their media scan and whatever that is, all right? But we'll talk more about media scans, but just kind of put it in your head for now. Just put it like on a sidebar note, and we'll get the media scan schedule up like very, very quickly, very shortly. And then final paper and projects, which will be the meat of your grade. That's way down the line. So, and then the course blog. The course blog will be, at this point, due to the strange conditions which we find ourselves in, I haven't been taking attendance. Due to the fact that it's just been this cacophony of chaos, really. But the course blog in which these videos are going to appear is going to be the place where you basically meet your attendance requirement by watching these videos and then commenting thereon, making a comment, on the actual material, right? It's like, what I discovered last semester was that people were of the opinion that, that their comments such as, "Great job, Mr. B, great lecture," or "I hope you're doing well, Mr. B," or whatever, constituted a cogent comment. And I mean, as much as I like the well wishing, it's like, thank you. No, it's you want to be making comments to the effect or asking questions. More important would be asking questions concerning or commentary concerning the material that I go over in the lecture in question. For instance, for this lecture, your comment should be related to this chapter, or comments that you want to make on this chapter that have a little bit of gravitas, whatever. They have something going on in them to prove to me that you've actually sat through the lecture without nodding off, without getting, going through 4-night skins or, listening to Korean pop on Spotify, that you actually watch the lecture. That's what that's all about. So in the immortal words of Robert De Niro from The Deer Hunter, this is this. This is this. Media arts profiles should be up by now. You should have commented on them. If for whatever reason you haven't, let's get it up. If you're having problems getting onto that thread and making a reply and getting your media arts profile up, please do so. Please do so as soon as possible. Remember what the questions were. It's just a brief bio of your media engagement, and some of you were basically like, I don't do anything with the media, because I'm not a major or whatever. And my response was, bull. It's like everybody, and even this chapter 1 by Hansen makes a real hard an important point about the fact that we're all engaged in media now. We're immersed in media, whether we're media creators, whether it's but it's your media arts profile can be about media use. It's it's, according to Hansen, the main activity that you guys are engaged in, above and beyond everything else. So that's a no-brainer. Want to start the chapter, want to start bringing it up, and I want to talk about some anecdotes too. Hansen starts each chapter with a kind of entry point, something usually anecdotal about what's going on in the world today, and he starts with the concept of fake news. And he talks about things like Russiagate and the ways in which fake news is defined, and the ways in which our current occupant of the Oval Office tends to think that the entire universe is just about fake news. It's like the level of self-centeredness here is that this man's belief system is constituted by the idea that all news is about him and it's all bullshit. It's all fake news. How this term kind of, reared its head back into the media had a lot to do with his repopularization of the term. But what Hansen really wants to stress, right from the beginning, is that fake news is not really a new thing at all, and has been around ever since. Gotta do something with this light. Ever since time immemorial, really. that there's been fake news of one kind or another for a very, very long period of time. And he uses as examples things like the British, back in the 1730s and 1740s, the British it was basically against the law to say living in Britain at that time. This is Revolutionary War period. It was considered the monarch, the king, being the king, didn't like it when people smack talked him, or parliament, or any of these very important people who had all the power. They didn't like it when would be bloggers of the age, like are the ancestors of bloggers would say something critical about them, up to and including putting you in places where you would keep your mouth shut, like the Tower of London or the Stockade or wherever was feasible for you to be locked up. It was a crime. So what were the workarounds? What were the workarounds that people would do in order to be able to critique or criticize or say something or bring awareness to people about what was going on in the halls of power? And he talks about one of them. He talks about is Samuel Johnson, a British man of letters, writing for a magazine called Gentleman's Magazine, using allegory, satire, and what he used was this whole idea of a fictional nation called the land of Lilliput. Debate, and this would appear in Gentleman's Magazine. This one's from October 1739. And it would all just be this thinly disguised story about what was really going on in British Parliament. Just using this, like so many things, like so many films or so many other different media, and certainly the film that we're watching in Image Theory right now, The Matrix, is kind of like that. It's an allegory. It's a satire. It's a spoof. And your generation is basically come up at a time when, between Saturday Night Live and Colbert and all these other things going on, satire and spoof has become this very, very legitimate way of raising social awareness or speaking truth to power or what have you. So he was engaged in this, and Hansen says Johnson's fictionalized and entertaining accounts of the actions of the British Parliament were acceptable to readers because they understood that British law banned direct reporting on the government. So readers, essentially, what Hansen wants to say is that readers were getting, quote-unquote, fake news. Fake news of a certain variety. Fake news that was really based on fact, all right? And we'll talk more about that. Tom Koch, in his book, The News is Myth, Fact and Context in Journalism, writes, indeed, most of the Parliament of Lilliput copy was, by modern journalistic standards, totally made up. But it carried the sense of the events that were really going on in Parliament. So that people with a little bit of media literacy at the time were like, yes, I get it. It's like this guy is supposed to be this guy and this guy is supposed to be that guy. And that's the kind of, and he'll go on and he'll talk about how one of our great American literary icons, Mark Twain, who's buried in Elmira, 40 minutes down the road, dealt with the same kind of stuff. And it's gone on for a very, very long period of time. I became friends with a Chinese documentary filmmaker a while back, about a decade ago, by the name of Zhang Yi. And what's very interesting in China is that, This isn't going 300 years ago. This is like still now. The Chinese government has a real problem, has a significant problem with people talking poorly about them, both in their own country and over here on this side of the Atlantic. They have some real problems when we say things about them that are critical. Anyway, Zhang Yi did a documentary. He's done several different documentaries. I think you could probably find this. He talked to me about the fact that anytime Chinese documentary filmmakers attempted to do any kind of political criticism of the system over there, he said they would become radioactive. He said they would become radioactive, meaning that no one would want to. It's like no one would hire them anymore, and they would literally have to go underground. They would literally have to go underground for criticizing the government. So what guys like Zhang Yi did was that he goes and does a documentary on the Chinese version of American Idol. All right, he does this documentary on the Chinese version of American Idol. Its name escapes me for some reason right now. I'll put it in the blog when I remember it. But the Chinese government was like, well, we don't have any problem with you doing that. Doing a documentary about American Idol, our version of it. It's like, but here's the thing. He uses the documentary on American Idol as just a lens on the entire culture. He uses as a microcosm, if you will, as a kind of way of surreptitiously really kind of talking about power and the role of the media in Chinese society through, the aspirations of these young women wanting to be on this show, so that he takes something that seems... So what I'm trying to get to here is he takes something that seems kind of innocuous, that the Chinese, they just didn't get it. They just didn't get it. Enough that, it's like, sometimes it's better to speak truth to power and be critical of government or be critical of political affairs by being sneaky, by being kind of sneaky about it, or being creative about it, especially in repressive environments where it's like speaking out, and it's like we're seeing it, it's like right now, it's like all over the world, it's like, there's myriad situations where people aren't even supposed to talk negative about the pandemic without, the the sheriff coming to the house with a warrant and putting you in the house of do right, so to speak. Like, there's places in the world, even today in 2020, where opening your mouth could theoretically get you put into a carceral situation, or even have this done to you, which nobody really wants done. It's very unpleasant. So there's that. So there's many different types of fake news that Hansen talks about. He'll break it down. He'll break it down into several different categories of what constitutes fake news. There's different flavors and varieties of this thing. The first, he says, is satire. Satire, fake news, is an ironic term, refers to stories that stretch the facts, right, in order to make a joke or a cultural criticism. And we know this. We see satire all around us, satire on Facebook, memes about certain things. It's like in our culture, our satire has become so prevalent, that ultimately it begs the question whether there's some problems with it. Are there problems with satire? And we'll talk more about that as the chapter goes on. He talks about a guy by the name of Neil Postman, who was a media theorist, who talked about, living in a television culture and getting to a point where everything was just kind of like there's a level of seriousness that's been like kind of taken out of the discourse. You know, like everything becomes entertainment or everything becomes jocular. Jocular. The next one is mistakes and fabrication. Sometimes people just get it wrong. And he talks about that too. He talks about how either by intention or just not getting your facts right. You know, if you're going to become a journalist, if you're going to become a blogger on things on major issues, you're going to ultimately have to, you know, deal with the idea of making sure. And I find this to be, you know, very important in my own line of work, which is making documentary films. It's like, you know, you got to make sure that you've got your facts straight, you know, and that's why at newspapers, at traditional, at traditional newspapers and traditional news outlets, there would always be an editorial staff, and even at like book publishers doing nonfiction books, you got people that get paid just to like proofread people's books and contact people and be like, is this right? You know, to make sure that you got your facts. So sometimes it's like stories have errors in them. A lot of times, you know, news, whether it be cable news, broadcast news, or like the newspaper or news magazines, it's like sometimes they'll have to do a retraction. Sometimes they'll have to say, hey, we got this wrong, or hey, it's like it didn't, you know. And that situation of errors has become more and more of a thing due to the fact that how hyper accelerated everything is, how everything now with a 24/7 news cycle and the way that news has got to be like boom, right up to the minute, like you've got to be on it like right then and there. It's a lot easier when you're pushing for haste over veracity. It becomes a lot easier to like screw the stuff up, and Hansen will give numerous examples of news out, like for instance with the whole Obamacare thing, you know. And Adam Schiffer is going to talk about this too in his book Evaluating Media Bias, that the major news outlets in their rush to judgment went out and like misreported a lot of details that a blogger, this SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States blog, actually had better access to, and this blog actually got the story right and got the story right on time, whereas CNN and some of the other major news outlets got it wrong and had to come back with their tails between their legs and say, oh, we're sorry, we misreported that. Sometimes stories are actually fabricated by unethical reporters. We'll talk more about that too. We'll talk about some of the scandals that have gone on in places like, one of the big ones over the last couple of decades is scandals at the New York Times. The New York Times being like probably the major newspaper of record in the United States. How they ran into these scandals with reporters of theirs that were making up shit, just making things up, like, and then they were printing them. At which point they were promptly fired. You know, but we'll talk more about some of that kind of phenomena and how it happens and how, you know, major news outlets deal with it, you know, after the fact. The third one is partisan clickbait. Everybody knows what clickbait is. You know, it's like, you know, a buongiornoism, a buongiorno expression is, it's a paraphrase of the great Russian author Dostoevsky once said, you can tell everything there is about the state of a society by the nature of their prisons. I updated that. I believe that you can pretty much tell everything there is to know about a society by clicking on its clickbait. Really, you can find out so much about the psyche of the common person who clicks on clickbait, and what it drives on, you know, what it thrives on. And this will like tie in a lot with like media literacy, with things like media literacy. Sometimes websites make up sensational stories designed specifically to attract readers to their pages so that the readers will see the ads that appear with the fake articles. It's all about getting eyeballs on ads, getting click-throughs, and even if it's just momentarily. We're going to talk a lot about in here about the way that ads are operating in the internet and how they play on us as quick. I've gotten to be quite the hired gun and being able to click out of an ad, man. As soon as I'm like, boom, it's like, but the idea of it like leaving a trace, like, even if you're seeing it for a few seconds, you're kind of like getting some of it, and that's the whole idea of that. Oftentimes if you dig deeply enough into these pages, you will see a mention that the stories are fictional and presumably, like, they'll cover their tracks and say, oh, by the way, that thing that you thought was true for when you clicked on it, it's really BS. They'll and that way they cover their butts, so to speak. Foreign political manipulation, Russiagate, all these different, but once again, foreign political manipulation of elections or sentiment or public sentiment. These, my friends, my good friends, are not new either, all right? This has been going on, and we'll talk more about foreign manipulation. This has been going on forever. It's been going on. Other countries trying to mess around with our elections. This is not something new. It's been going on for a long time, and guess what, folks? We do it to other people. The United States actually does it too. So, in case you were like living in Cloud Cuckoo Land or the Wizard of Oz or Narnia or whatever, like, reality, fantastical reality you were in, to think that the United States was not in the business of manipulating other people's elections. It's like now it's like the red pill has been administered. You'll know. We'll talk more about that. Russian intelligence agencies planted and amplified stories throughout the United States and Europe in order to try to manipulate elections. All right, it's been done many times in the past, and not always with social media. All right, media criticism is the last one here. Politicians and others often use the term fake news to refer to news outlets that, for one reason or another, they just don't like. They just don't like, and that's an easy, like, quick and dirty way of telling somebody that, I don't like what you're saying about me. So it's like, I guess one can even do it in one's own life if you wanted to. Just like, what so and so just like, bleated about me on Instagram is fake news. So you can use these skills in your own life. You would apply this stuff. Hansen starts to want to unpack rather what media is, and how and define our terms. It's chapter 1, so there's a lot of defining of terms that's going on at this point. He quotes a guy by the name of George Gerbner, media scholar George Gerbner. He says, provides a simple definition. Communication is social interaction through messages. Social interaction through messages. What do we do when we communicate? We're usually attempting to reach somebody else, all right? Which brings up the idea of it's always between at least two people, all right? But not necessarily, right? Because we talked about this whole idea of, sorry about this. I put this on the desk to make it look like, I was like more scholarly, if I had a globe here. So, social interaction through messages. More plainly put, communication is how we interact with our entire world, our interaction with the world, whether through spoken words, written words, gestures, music, painting, photographs, or dance. The important point is that communication is a process. It's a process. It's not a static thing. It's evolving. It changes. It's never finished. It's like the important communication is an interaction that allows individuals, groups, and institutions to share ideas. All right. Here, I would say that sharing ideas is a little bit limiting because I think communication we have a tendency to share just more than egghead cerebral ideas. Sometimes we communicate emotions. Sometimes we communicate commands. Something that when we're going to talk about the ways in which communication shapes our wills. Shapes. It wants to get us to do something. It wants to get us to take an action of some type or another. And this is not working right now. That's lovely. Is communication nonverbal? Think about it. We communicate very, very early on, my friends. We communicate right when we come out. In the incubator, you're sitting there, your little version of yourself, this little creature that looks like E.T. in the maternity ward. It's like when you're hungry, what do? It's like you start crying. When you're happy, it's like baby starts smiling early on. Usually they say it's because they have gas, but you're communicating you're communicating very, very early in the game, and you are making your needs known very, very early in the game. And even before you know how to speak, so communication is going on constantly, it's like, do pets communicate? Of course they do, it's like when a thunderstorm comes, and the dog comes in, he's like doing his thing. I know, I'm just like, it's like, yeah, I get it. It's like, I get it. You're scared of thunder. Communication. So, I think that for me, at least for me, in my own scholarly approach to things, I think many things communicate. Communication we should take communication and media in the widest possible context and clarifying it when we need to, making distinctions between interpersonal communication and mass media and other areas in between, right? Hansen, gives us a pyramid. Pyramids are another form of communicating things, communicating ideas through through graphs and charts and whatnot, and he breaks it down into 4 different levels of communication. And you can see here, and when you get the PowerPoints, you'll see that as you go up the scale, there's fewer senders, more receivers. As you go down the scale, more senders, because what are we doing? We're like chattering with each other, like any of you ever seen South Pacific with the famous song Happy Talk? Happy Talk. Talk about things you like. To me, my brother used to love this when it came out. We'd go crazy because we just thought it was just so goofy. The media pyramid. He starts at the bottom. He starts at the bottom of the media pyramid with types of communication. First one is interpersonal. Intrapersonal, not intrapersonal, which means within, right? Like intramural, right? That has to do with communication with oneself. I need to take a really quick break here. Had to take a quick break. Interpersonal, communication with oneself. This is very, very easy to explain. It's like, what do we do? And what did we do with our mini assignment? The mini assignment was to do what? What was the goal? The goals of the mini assignment of going out somewhere and kind of detaching from whatever social media or whatever electronic media you had, and go somewhere and not only detach from that, but to also become aware of what? The kind of dialogue, the kind of chatter that goes on within our own consciousness, within our own our line of thinking, and to start becoming aware of that, being able to take an outside kind of stand apart from it and develop the skills of learning a little bit about your own tapes that you're running in your head all the time, you know. And I honestly believe that, you know, it's like that mini assignment should be something that you should think about doing that on a regular basis, really. Thinking about, you know, getting out somewhere where you're just kind of, think of it as almost like a cleanse, you know, like, you know, people talk about, like my sister-in-law, she's like got a gym and all this. She's like one of these people. And she's always talking about doing a cleanse, you know, and they drink these things, these strange concoctions. God knows what's in them. But this idea of like just being able to like, one, become aware of like what's going on, and that it's not always, you know, the stuff that's going on in our heads. Once you become, you know, more attuned to it, it's not always being generated by us alone. You know, the subconscious is very, very tricky, you know, about how the media kind of gets in there and starts running its own scripts, you know, and how to, and I honestly believe, and this might be somewhat controversial, but I honestly believe that media literacy has got to have this component to it, that we need to have that level of, when we start talking about media literacy, we have to be able to have that level of like critical self-awareness to know what the media's effects are on us on both a conscious and subconscious level, so that we can keep our own intellectual and emotional autonomy from the whole thing. Because the things that are going on right now, you know, with the media are very, very both interesting and very, very catastrophic, my friends. You know, and we need to talk about this like kind of frenzy and the ways in which it becomes this conduit of collective and individual fear or indecision. You know, and I hate to bring up such a sober topic at the moment, but I was watching the show with Glenn Greenwald on it, and he was saying that there were news reports that, like, first of all, it's a given that 19 right now currently there's a statistic that 52% of you 19 to 24-year-olds are back living with your parents, or living with your grandparents, or living with somebody else, due to the fact that the economic opportunities out there for like self-sustainment have started to dry up. You know, the other really, really sobering and grim statistic that I need to put out there is this idea that there was another study just recently done that within the last 6 months, this same 19 to 24 year old demographic, 1 out of 4 has seriously considered suicide. This is not good, my friends. You know, seriously considered suicide, all right? And we need to talk about the way this situation that we're living in, and this kind of, you know, we talked in image theory the other day about the numerous interlocking, grave predicaments that we're in, but we're also in an emotional predicament, you know, and we need to be able to navigate through this, all right? And that's part of my mission statement, is helping you to deal with that, you know, through knowledge, through self-knowledge, and through knowledge of the things that are really going on. Second level of communication, interpersonal. Interpersonal basically just means one-on-one. Talks about this. Talks about interpersonal, and what does Hansen have to say about interpersonal? Let's see. one-on-one. The intentional or accidental, it doesn't have to be intentional, transmission of information through verbal or non-verbal message systems to another human being. All right? To one other human being. All right? This is usually at the level of what? When I'm IMing someone, you know, all of the typing and then the waiting and then when is this person going to respond? It's like, or just talking over coffee with somebody, or communicating with or having an argument with your roommate, you know, that they're smoking too much of the chronic and they need to stop. That's one-on-one communication. Interpersonal communication can be a conversation with a friend or a hug that tells your mother you love her. You know, is it always verbal? No, it's not always verbal, right? We communicate in many different ways, you know, with our body language. You know, my mother, God love her, may she rest in peace, she had what me and my siblings knew as the stare. The stare, my folks, that was handed down to her by my grandfather, her father, which was this device that she would use very, very effectively to let you know that A, she was pissed off at some behavior you were engaging in, and two, to stop it at the risk of being grounded forever. And there was the stare, and it's like, when my mother did the stare, it's like, you would stop. You would stop what you were doing, and then you would fly right. So, is it always verbal? No, it's not always verbal. Interpersonal communication provides many opportunities for feedback. Feedback. This is going to be very, very important in our study of mass media, right? Because the mechanisms of feedback over history, and once again, this is not something new, all right? Media has always been interactive, my friends, all right? It's not, has it changed? Have the forms of interactivity changed? Of course. But we'll talk about these things. We need to be able to we need to be able to talk about the things that have remained the same in media from the beginning, and the things that have really changed, and to be able to parse that out. You know, to be able to say, like, you know, is this whole fake news thing just another form of, you know, of this? You know, what's truly new? We need to be able to pose the question of what's really new in this game, and what's just kind of something, you know, the same old thing and a brand new drag, as David Bowie said in his song "Fashion." You know, it's the same old thing. Interpersonal communication, so feedback. Your friend nods, raises an eyebrow, touches you on the arm, simply answers your question. You know, this back and forth that goes on, you know. Very, very important in humor. You know, very, very important in communicating funny things. You know, like when you're texting. I don't know about y'all, but, you know, I have this, like, coterie of my old crew. And we have all these in-jokes that know, and I'm sure everyone knows something about this. Like these things that we can just say one word, and everybody in the group kind of gets it. You know, that something that's become a running joke that, you know, one-on-one, it's like communication with humor, very, very important. So there's that. Number 3, group to one person. Or rather, group communication. In groups of communication, one person is communicating with a group of 2 or more. 2 or more usually means a group. So usually a group is what? 3 or more. You know, communicating amongst a group. You know, usually in a brick and mortar setting, it's like, you know, for instance, like when I'm doing a lecture, that's different, right? But if I'm having if you go to graduate school and you have a seminar, you know, this highfalutin term for, you know, people, these eggheads, like talking a bunch of nonsense. They do it around a table. which elevates the whole thing to this level of valor of valor and seriousness. By putting students in a circle, you are made to feel like an equal. Well, whatever. That's what we're talking about. One person communicating with a group of two or more. You know, what does Hansen say about it? It's near the top of the pyramid and reaches a level of unequal communication, in which one person is communicating with an audience or two or more people. Group communication often has a leader. Group communication often has a leader. You know, in this particular situation, you know, it's like I must concede the fact that I'm kind of the leader of this class. You know, as much as I want it to be a democracy, it's more often like me being der Führer. You know, but that's okay. In a small group, family at a dinner table, coach with a basketball team, each individual has an opportunity to respond to the leader and is likely to do so. In a large group, such as the 350 student lectures section of a university class, which is not occurring right now, each individual still has an opportunity to respond, but is unlikely to do so. You know, if you're in a 350, it's like, except, of course, for Bongiorno, whose raison d'etre, whose reason for being, it's like, I went to NYU, or very early on, and I would have these classes where there were like 200 people, right? But this was always my goal, and I would strongly suggest this to you too, as like a way of operating. You let that, it's like, if you want to stand out, you let that professor know who you are, what you're about, and what your name is by like day 2. You know, it's like, I would always just be like, bam, Buongiorno here. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know I'm here. You know, there's also my behavior in a lot of other different areas, which I won't go into. Other situations test the boundaries of group communication, such as a Kendrick Lamar concert at an amphitheater or a concert hall, someplace that you would not ever, just nothing, just, I wouldn't be there. It's like, all due respect, just wouldn't be there. With the amplifiers and multiple video screens, there's a high level of communication technology, but very limited possibility for audience members to do anything except scream, you know, or whatever, or ingest some illegal substance. Then we get to mass communication. We finally get to the top of the pyramid. Mass communication. What is it? Individual or institution uses technology. Usually mass communication involves some kind of technology. We know that, all right? Even if the technology, but once again, I think we have to expand what our definition of technology is. You know, is our newspapers a technology? Is a book a technology? I would say under this, I would say yeah. Is it electronic? No. Is it a technology? Was the printing press a technology? Yes. Yes, that is a technology, and that's the way we talk about it. Are photographs a technology? Yes, of course they're a technology. They come from practical means. Is it electronic? No, but we'll get there. Individual or institution uses technology to send to large mixed audience. Usually does not know the sender, right? It's like usually, you know, the guys on the morning show or The View or whatever, you know, those ABC This Morning or CBS, they don't know you. They don't know. However, you know, I would contend that there is a whole, and we'll talk about this with rituals, when we start talking about rituals. There is, for a lot of people, and this has been true of mass media for a very, very long time, this idea of the people on the news shows kind of being part of your crew, or being your friends, you know, or just being, and they are chosen for those qualities, right? Of being affable and likable, you know, like the happy-go-lucky meteorologist, the kind of like punchy sports guy, you know, and it's like, you know, these people are like, you know, are employed to kind of convey this idea that you know, and this gets into a whole psychological can of worms about how television operates. Sender but they don't know you. They don't know you. You usually don't know them. Finally, after all this hullabaloo, Hansen finally gets to the what the purpose of the book is going to be. And he says, the purpose of this book is to help you better understand mass communication and the mass media. In the 15 chapters of this book, we look at a variety of topics. Bullet point: the institutions that make up the media and how they function in and affect with an A, our society. The mass media, we have to understand, mass media is as such an institution and a collection of institutions at the same time. Not unlike the university, not unlike the government, not unlike, other institutions within society, whether it be the military, whether it be, the medical industry. These are the hospitals, prisons. These are institutions. Mass media, same thing. It's an institution, all right? An institution basically meaning that something that is structured in a way in which it has a major effect on our lives. Bullet point 2, who owns and controls the media? Who owns and controls the media? It's like, there's a famous line in this movie called Slapshot. Any of you hockey guys out there, were one of the members of this French guy on the team, Paul Newman's team, the Chiefs. He goes to the owners, because nobody knows who owns the team at this point. He goes, who own the Chiefs? And the owner's like, owns. He's like correcting. He's like, owns. Who owns and controls the media? This is going to be very important, because this is going to start getting into media conglomeration and media consolidation and how fewer and fewer, how the big fish are eating up all the little fish so that there's no little fish anymore because they ate them all. It's like putting guppies in a tank with a bunch of Oscars, all right? It's like I assure you that if you take a couple Oscars and you put them in an aquarium and you put in like a bag of guppies, it's like in the time that it will take you to walk around the block, you will come back and notice that the guppies have somehow magically vanished, all right? We can understand the media like that. All right, that a lot of the little fish got eaten by the big fish, and so and now there's just there's a handful of big fish that's floating around, and we'll talk about that. The media themselves, including books, magazines, newspapers, radio, recorded music, movies, television, the internet. We need to talk about all these different modalities. That's a $5 word, $5 word, right? Modalities of the media. Industries that support the media. Not media as such, but other industries that both support and are supported by the media. Including advertising and public relations, folks. And we will talk about that change in our culture wherein, advertising becomes a thing. And they have a say, and basically, we get into a situation where advertisers are paying the bills, are paying your bills, all right, if you are a media institution. The laws and ethics that regulate and control media. The laws and ethics that regulate and control media. This is going to be a long story, all right, about the ways in which there has been throughout history this kind of every once in a while, it's kind of like walking a dog. Sometimes it's like, you let him run, and then sometimes it's like fishing. Sometimes you let that line run, and sometimes you got to reel it back in. And we'll find that, whether government regulation or regulation that was induced by, for instance, audience pushback, about supposed, indiscretions of the media or whatever. Like, we got to talk about the ways in which the laws and the ethics, and we'll also find that many instances wherein media took the high road and regulated itself before it got regulated. We'll see that in the motion picture industry. We'll see that in newspapers. We'll see that within mass media, there is always these instincts there's always a semblance of a conscience there, in which people that are practicing media, whether they be journalists or whether they be writers, recently I know that there was a manifesto of a sort. I believe it was in Harper's Bazaar magazine. It had to do with this whole idea of cancel culture, and we'll talk about that. But once again, this whole letter that was signed in Harper's about cancel culture is just that. A group of people attempting to exercise their conscience within their particular media profession. All right, and that is an old dance. All right, the role the media plays in countries and cultures around the world. All right, this one's going to be a big one in regards to how American culture and how dominant both the Hollywood, television, and film industry was an attempt at really colonizing the rest of the world for a period of time. That colonialism or taking over countries or affecting countries doesn't always come at the point of a gun or at the point of a nuclear missile. Sometimes it's done through media. All right. By the time that you are finished, you will better understand what the media are, why do they function as they do, and what roles they play in your life. By the way, it's like this will be the first, last, and only time that you will see Bongiorno this semester in shorts. All right. Not that it's a bad thing. I think 3 miles a day on the treadmill, my legs are all right. Not that self-conscious about it, except they're like boomer legs. Elements of mass communication. Although people often use the term mass communication and mass media interchangeably, they are significantly different concepts. All right? What's he mean here? Mass communication is a process, whereas the mass media are simply the tools, the technological tools used to transmit the messages of mass communication. Let's get that down. Mass communication is a process. Mass media itself, it's like if mass communication is this, mass media is the stuff. It's the tools, it's our toolkit of how we do it. Earlier in this chapter, we define mass communication as a society-wide communication process in which an individual or institution uses technology to send messages to a large, mixed audience, most of whose members are not known to the sender. Let's now take a closer look at all the players in the mass communication process and at several models that describe how these elements interact with each other. At which point, Mr. Hansen, or Dr. Hansen, or whatever he calls himself, starts to give us models. Different models of this process, all right? And I'm going to end with the first model, which was the primary model of the communication process for a very, very long time, in one way or another. He calls it the sender message channel receiver model, or the SMRC, It's been called other things by other people. And he, at least in Chapter 1, fails to recognize a couple of major players in this that the Barron book actually gets more into. Two people by the name of Osgood and Schramm, who kind of set up this model, right? To have a sender, message, channel, receiver model, you have to have these 4 different components. You need to have a sender. You need to have a message. You need to have a channel that it goes through, and then you have to have somebody to receive it, all right? Simple enough, right? And this is a model that we want to talk about specifically in regards to mass media, all right? Who's the sender? The sender in this case is mass media, right? The one, whether it be CBS News or the CBS network itself or CNN or even, dare I say it, Facebook, is a mass media institution. Or the New York Times or Netflix, one could say that is Netflix a media outlet? Yeah, of course it is. They just do different things. This has started to change, all right, but this whole idea of one to many, of the one trickling down to the many, this model is now being contested. And what is it being contested by, my friends? It is being contested by the fact that we have been given, seemingly by magic, this ability to do our own thing and interact and do blogs and stuff like this, like we're gonna do with the class blog. So the landscape is changing, and he uses this whole idea of the SCOTUS blog breaking the Obamacare story, which major news networks got wrong, as an example of how this one to many, how a lot of the small fish that got ate by the Oscars, all of a sudden they're reappearing again, and they're finding that they're kind of a little faster and a little better, and they can stay in the tank and survive. And we'll talk more about that when we get to the next lecture. We'll finish up Chapter 1 in the next lecture. Please move on to Chapter 2. Don't worry about anything. I got everything under control now. It's I hope you enjoyed Jonathan's little film. And we'll get more into this with the next lecture. All right, so watch this one. Make your comments. It's get your also, the question is often asked of me, Bongiorno, when do you want the comments in? I never put a set time, but a couple 3 days most. Let's figure 48 hours after it appears. All right, let's give it 2 days. It's when you get the email that says, voila, from Bongiorno's Whole Cuisine Kitchen, there is a new item on the menu of celebrity chef that you are to ingest. Please do so within 2 days or it will go sour and then you will have a tummy ache. All right? 2 days. All right? Give yourself 2 days to watch it and respond. If you haven't, it's I'm going to give a little bit of leeway here. If you come in at on day 3 with it, it's all right, but you'll get my mother's stare. I'll give you my mom's stare that she used to give me about it to keep you in line. All right, so I hope everybody is doing well. Please hang on. It's I'm going to try to make this as good as we can make it. So have a good day. Thank you.